When I was in the fourth grade, I overslept one morning and my mother had to take me to school on that particular day. And while we were driving there, somewhere in the, wasn't a lot of conversation, but somewhere along the way, she said to me, "Ken, did you brush your teeth?" And I said, "No, Mom, I didn't brush my teeth." And she looked at me and she said, I wouldn't think any more about going to school and not brushing my teeth than I would not washing my face. And I said, "Well, I didn't wash my face either." And my mother was obsessed with this idea that you can only make a first impression once. And it has two factors that you have to deal with in that first impression. One of them was your appearance. And so she was always seemingly obsessed with my shoes and whether or not they were polished. I don't even think you polish shoes anymore, but when I was a kid, she was always checking to see if my shoes had been polished. And she always worked with my grammar because she thought the second part of making a first impression was how you spoke. So she was always working on those verb tenses, always, and pronouns and adverbs, and putting them just all the time. She was doing that because she believed that how you looked and how you spoke was the first impression that you made. And you spent much of your life either supporting that or trying to overcome that. And she was constantly talking about that to me as a child, and it's stuck with me even yet today. And I yet polish my shoes all the time, and I constantly am working and looking, particularly when I write, on sentence structure and how I use verbs and sentences and that kind of thing. But it is important, and those things make lasting impressions, not just first impressions on how we deal with people. I want to talk for just a moment about how it is that we speak and how we talk, and a couple of things that have happened really in the last 6 months that I've never seen as a part of our society before. And that is the use of not just profanity, but vulgar words in what I think of as public discourse. Now, I have lived a sheltered environment. I would be the first to say that. When you grow up in a parsonage and you go to a Christian college and then you become a pastor, you're not really exposed the same way that other people are, probably to the real world. But nevertheless, you know that certain things exist. And in the last 6 months, though, I have heard the use of all things, the F word. That's right, I said that, the F word. And it has been quite, I would say, unnerving. Not that I'm a prude, but it makes me think of something that was really shocking to me about, I don't know, it's been maybe 20 years ago. When I was maybe 44 years old, I decided that I was going to go back to school and get a PhD. But at that time, you had to pass a second language proficiency. And so I had to go back and take a freshman French class in order to pass that. And I remember showing up the first day in the French class, and I was really nervous about this because I was this old man, 44 years old, showing up in this class full of freshmen, if you will. And when I got there, it was my nightmare. It was probably 25, honestly, young women who were taking French. And here was this man, this old man in the back. And there I was. And I'm thinking, what are they thinking I'm up to or what I'm like? But, really, they made me feel pretty good about it. I mean, they were friendly, they were engaging, and we split up into these small groups to practice our French. And when we did, I was exposed to something I had never been exposed to in my life. And that was for young women to use this F word in just casual conversation. I'd never been exposed to that. And they were just talking and using it as if it were nothing. And I mean, my introduction initially was, the bathroom wall somewhere some 40 years ago. I mean, it was just a shock to me. It was a shock to me. But I have had trouble just accepting that as a part of sort of the public discourse of our life. Yes, I've seen movies just like you have. Yes, I have streaming and I watch podcasts and they do all of those kinds of conversations with those words. But I'm still not ready in the course of public policy and public discourse to make that one of our words. And it's happened. I mean, not just by accident, but randomly now it happens. It happened in the judiciary last week. That means it actually happened in court. An attorney or a judge presented something, and in the course of that word was a part of it. And then protesters and congressmen and senators somehow use this word to make something more intense, if you will, than if they didn't use the word. And I'm just not ready to go there. And I think it's possible to push back on this and make it an unacceptable words. There are other words that were once acceptable that are not acceptable now. Think for a moment about the N word. That is totally unacceptable. There's not an arena, there's not a place, there's not a situation anywhere in American culture where that word is acceptable. Well, I think we need to do that to the F word. It is not acceptable in the course of public policy or in courtrooms and all of these other things. And if you and I don't do something, it's going to become acceptable in public policy, public discourse, and all of these other things. And in just a moment, I'm going to tell you what to do. First of all, this is not about one political party. I have heard people in both political parties, Republicans and Democrats, in the course of the last 6 months, use this word. I have read the text of rulings within the judiciary where this word was used by someone on the bench. That's almost unbelievable. Nor am I coming at this from a spiritual perspective, but a moral perspective. Moral clarity is like way behind on this issue. If there are things that are right to do, there are proportionately things that are wrong to do. What I want you to do is to email me, and I will send you this letter, and I want you to mail it to 3 people. You can mail it to the House of Representatives, and they have a committee on protocol, and her name is Representative Fox. The Senate has a House Rules Committee. His name is Senator James Lankford. Got all these addresses. And then, of course, John Roberts, who is the Supreme Court Justice. I want us to send it to all of these people, and this is the letter that I want you to do. In the past several weeks, political leaders, persons within the judiciary, and protesters have chosen to use the word that historically was unacceptable in the public arena. This is the F word. This touches on an important issue in public discourse, the power of language, its impact on different audiences. Words, especially those considered vulgar, insulting, carry significant weight because they evoke strong emotions and can shape perceptions in which they are used. The words do have power, whether we like it or not. They can inspire, they can persuade, offend, or alienate people. The F word in particular is a potent example because it is globally recognized as vulgar and inappropriate in the public arena. Its usage in the political or judicial context distracts from the substance of an argument and alienates a portion of the audience who feel disrespected because of the use of the words. A well-articulated argument does not need to reply with shock or vulgarity in order to make a point. Avoiding such language demonstrates discipline and respect to an audience. The absence of the F word does not diminish the viability of a political or judicial argument. It keeps the focus on the substance rather than the style. Civility in language is not about censorship. It is about respecting individuals and effective communication. Should words have such power? Well, it might be ideal for them not to have that much power, but they do, whether we like it or not. But the reality is that language is deeply tied to personal and cultural values. As well, the emotional response they generate. The F word carries historical and social baggage that cannot be dismissed. The public discourse, leaders and activists have a responsibility to consider the impact on a diverse audience. This is not about limiting free speech, but about choosing words that encourage dialogue, respect, and clarity. Public policy, political discourse are meant to be accessible to all members of society, regardless of their age, their background,
are their sensibilities. When leaders or protesters use language that is considered vulgar or insulting, it creates barriers, resistance to engagement. Words have power, and their usage in public and political discourse matters greatly. Leaders and protesters must communicate in ways that respect and uphold the dignity of their audience and the Constitution that allows them to use such words. By doing this, they can ensure their message is heard and considered by the broadest possible audience. Those in position of power should model the behavior they wish to see in a society. Now, I'm going to send this letter to the people that I've said, and if you'll send me an email, I will send you a link to this letter and who to mail it to. If we don't, this is going to become a part of our public discourse, and we can make it unacceptable. I want to do that.